Understanding the evolution of media in Nigeria. Understanding the evolution of the media landscape in Nigeria requires a careful look at how communication systems emerged, expanded, and adapted across the country's major historical periods. From the early stirrings of national identity in the independence era to the challenges and transitions of the post-colonial and post-independence years, each phase introduced new forms of media and reshaped how information circulated among citizens. The long stretch of military rule brought its own restrictions and innovations, while the return to civilian governance in the Fourth Republic reopened Nigeria's media space to private ownership, diversity, and public debate. Today, the digital era marks another leap, with online platforms and mobile technology transforming how Nigerians access, produce, and share information. Examining these periods, one after another, provides a fuller picture of how Nigeria's media has grown in structure, reach, and influence. Media in pre-colonial Nigeria before c. 1860, before colonial intrusion, communication in the region that later became Nigeria relied on indigenous systems shaped by culture, geography, and social organization. There were no print newspapers or electronic channels. Information circulated through oral, performative, and symbolic means. The town crier was one of the most recognizable communication agents. Appointed by the king, chief or council of elders, he moved through villages at dawn or dusk beating a gong or wooden slit drum to attract attention before announcing instructions, public warnings, or festival dates. Because societies were organized into kingdoms, clans, and age grades, this method worked across Yoruba towns, Igbo communities, Hausa Fulani Emirates, and numerous minority groups. Oral genres carried social memory and political messages. Griot-style praise singers, bards, storytellers, drummers, and heralds transmitted events and values during rituals, moonlight gatherings, or royal ceremonies. Talking drums, flutes, horns, and other instruments also encoded messages. The Arrow long-distance network in Igboland and the Hausa trade caravans helped move information between regions through well-traveled trade routes. Marketplaces, shrines, and communal squares served as regular centers of news exchange. Even visual and symbolic media existed. Marks on calabashes, cloth patterns, body markings, totemic symbols, masquerade costumes, and royal regalia communicated status, identity, and political authority. These systems show that pre-colonial media were not primitive but suited to the social and political structure of their time. Media in the colonial era c. 1860 to 1960. British rule brought new communication technologies and formalized media institutions. The print era began with the rise of mission presses in the mid-19th century. In 1859, the Reverend Henry Townsend established Iwe Irehinfun Ewan Era Egba, T. Yoruba, often recognized as the first Nigerian newspaper. It appeared every fortnight and mainly served Yoruba-speaking Christian converts in Abeokuta. By the 1880s and 1890s, African-owned newspapers had emerged in Lagos, driven by educated elites who used the press to challenge discriminatory policies and promote nationalism. These included the Lagos Times 1880, Lagos Observer, Lagos Weekly Record, Nigerian Pioneer, and later, the West African Pilot founded by Nnamdi Azikiwe in 1937, which played a major role in political mobilization. Colonial communication also expanded through government gazettes, missionary bulletins, and commercial printing houses. The telegraph reached Lagos and major administrative towns in the early 20th century, linking colonial offices and improving bureaucratic coordination. Post offices, postal routes, and money order systems created a new information infrastructure across regions. With technological growth, radio eventually arrived under government control. In 1933, the British Empire Service began rebroadcasts in Nigeria through wired loudspeakers known as Radio Diffusion System or DS units. By 1951, this evolved into the Nigerian Broadcasting Service NBS, and in 1957, The Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation (NBC) with nationwide programming. Radio expanded political awareness in the decade leading to independence. Film also entered the communication landscape. Colonial film units produced documentaries and propaganda reels shown in community halls, schools, and open squares to support health campaigns or justify governance. In short, while pre-colonial media relied on oral, symbolic, and communal structures, the colonial era introduced literacy-based, print and electronic media that reshaped political communication and prepared the ground for a modern Nigerian press. Media in the independence and early post-colonial era 1960 to late 1970s. With political independence on the 1st of October 1960, Nigeria inherited a press culture that was already vibrant and deeply tied to nationalist politics. The first 2 decades after independence saw rapid expansion, both in the number of media outlets and in the technologies used. Newspapers multiplied across regions. Titles like the West African Pilot, the Daily Times, the Nigerian Tribune, and the Northern Nigerian Citizen continued to dominate the early 1960s, and by the mid-1970s, the press scene had widened, with new papers such as The Punch established 1971, and The Guardian established 1973 as a weekly, later daily in the 1980s. These newspapers were crucial in shaping political debate in a period marked by military coups, Civil War 1967 to 1970, and the struggle to stabilize the young republic. Radio remained the most accessible medium. The Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation and regional broadcasting stations offered news, cultural programs, and political commentary. By the early 1970s, radio ownership had spread into both urban and rural communities due to transistor sets and government investment. Television, first introduced in 1959 in Ibadan, expanded in the independence era. New stations appeared in Lagos, Kaduna, Enugu, and Benin from the 1960s through the 1970s, and although expensive to run, TV became a potent state tool for information and national integration. The government also used the Nigerian Television Authority, created in 1977, to centralize TV broadcasting. Alongside print and broadcast, film and cinema culture grew around celluloid productions by the Federal Film Division and independent filmmakers. Public communication also relied heavily on national ceremonies, pamphlets, posters, government circulars, and civic education drives. The post-colonial independence era was therefore a hybrid media space. It combined inherited British communication forms with new national institutions, and each medium reflected the political turbulence and ambitions of the young Nigerian state. Media in the post-independence era 1960 to 1966. In the years immediately after independence in 1960, Nigeria entered a period of political optimism and rapid institutional growth. The media landscape reflected this early confidence. Newspapers were the most influential medium, many of them carrying over from the nationalist struggle. The Daily Times, West African Pilot, Nigerian Tribune, Nigerian Outlook, and Northern Nigerian Citizen shaped debates on governance, ethnicity, and economic development. New titles emerged in the early 1960s as the regions sought to promote their political viewpoints, creating a lively press culture that mirrored the ideological differences of the First Republic. Radio, already well established through the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation (NBC) and regional stations, expanded its reach. It was the most accessible medium in the country. Cheap transistor radios made news available to farmers, traders, and civil servants from Lagos to Maiduguri. Television was still a prestige medium, but growing steadily. Following the pioneering Western Nigeria television service in 1959, new stations were established in Lagos and Kaduna in the early 1960s, turning Nigeria into one of the leading television hubs in Africa at the time. Government information services continued to rely on pamphlets, public notices, traveling theater troupes, community mobilization units, and film vans, which projected educational films in markets and village squares. Cinema houses in major cities screened both Western films and locally produced documentaries from the Federal Film Unit. The post-independence era therefore saw a hybrid media environment combining modern print and broadcast systems with older forms of public communication. Yet the political tensions of the First Republic, marked by disputed elections, regional crises, and growing ethnic mistrust, shaped media narratives and foreshadowed the upheavals that would follow. Media in the military era 1966 to 1999, the long military period, beginning with the January 1966 coup and extending through successive regimes until 1999, reshaped Nigerian media under conditions of censorship, propaganda, and state centralization. In the early military years and during the Civil War 1967 to 1970, the press was heavily monitored. Newspapers such as the Daily Times, New Nigerian, Tribune, Sketch, and later The Punch operated under frequent restrictions. Some papers were shut down temporarily, and journalists were detained when their reporting clashed with government interests. Despite this, the press remained resilient, often pushing the boundaries of criticism, especially during less repressive regimes. Radio became the most strategic medium for the military. Control of the radio station was the symbolic and practical mark of a successful coup, since radio could instantly broadcast announcements and orders to the entire nation. The Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation was tightly supervised, and military leaders used radio to justify policy decisions, manage wartime communication, and shape public opinion. Television expanded more rapidly under military rule than under the First Republic. The creation of the Nigerian Television Authority (NTA) in 1977 brought all state-owned TV stations under a single national network. Although this centralization increased state control, it also broadened coverage and standardized broadcasting nationwide. The 1970s and early 1980s saw a rise in cultural and educational programming, but political content was firmly regulated. Magazines such as Newswatch, established 1985, The News and Tell in the 1990s, played a powerful role in investigative journalism despite severe repression from the Buhari 1984 to 1985 and Abacha 1993 to 1998 regimes. Many issues were seized, and editors like Dili Guy were paid with their lives for challenging state authority. Film and theater also developed during the military era. Celluloid productions by Ola Balogun and Hubert Ogund in the 1970s and 1980s formed the early roots of what later became Nollywood. Public communication still relied on posters, community announcements, church and mosque networks, town criers in rural areas, and government campaigns broadcast through radio jingles. By the late 1990s, Nigeria's media environment had become a battleground between authoritarian state power and a bold press tradition. This era demonstrated how media, even under harsh control, could become a site of resistance and democratic agitation. Media in the civilian Fourth Republic era, 1999 to the present. The return to democratic rule in 1999 marked the beginning of Nigeria's Fourth Republic, a period that transformed the media landscape through political liberalization, commercial competition, and rapid technological expansion. After years of military censorship, the press entered the new era with renewed confidence. Newspapers such as The Guardian, Punch, Vanguard, This Day, The Nation, and Daily Trust became major platforms for public debate, investigative reporting, and democratic accountability. The environment encouraged growth in weekly magazines, private publishing houses, and specialized sector-based publications on business, ICT, arts, and education. Radio, already Nigeria's most pervasive medium, expanded sharply as the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission began issuing licenses to private operators. By the mid-2000s, stations like Ray Power FM, Cool FM, Vazobia FM, Rhythm FM, Freedom Radio, and many others created a vibrant, multilingual broadcast culture that reached urban and rural listeners alike. Television also diversified beyond the state-controlled NTA. Private stations, such as Channels Television, African independent television 8, Silverbird TV, and Manai TV emerged as influential outlets for news and entertainment, often offering more critical coverage than government-owned networks. The rise of pay TV services in the early 2000s, especially MultiChoice's DSTV and later GOTV, expanded viewer access to international news, films, and sports. Nollywood blossomed during this period, shifting from VHS and VCD distribution in the early 2000s to more polished productions, and becoming one of the world's most prolific film industries. Although regulatory pressures and political interference did not disappear, the Fourth Republic provided the most open media climate Nigeria had seen since independence, with citizens increasingly relying on newspapers, radio talk shows, TV bulletins, and entertainment media to negotiate political life in a democratic framework. Media in the digital era, mid-2000s to the present. From the mid-2000s onwards, Nigeria entered its digital era, fundamentally altering how information is produced, shared, and consumed. The process began with the introduction and spread of GSM mobile telephony in 2001, which brought millions of Nigerians into the communication grid. By the late 2000s, mobile phones had become widespread, enabling text messaging, mobile browsing, and citizen-driven information exchange. The real explosion came with the rise of social media and affordable smartphones from about 2010 onwards. Platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, now X, WhatsApp, Instagram, and later TikTok created an entirely new media ecosystem in which ordinary users became producers, distributors, and commentators. Online newspapers and blogs such as Sahara Reporters, Premium Times, The Cable, Pulse, Bella Naija, and Naraland reshaped journalism, often breaking stories faster than mainstream outlets. Streaming platforms transformed entertainment. YouTube enabled independent creators, while Irakot, Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Showmax brought Nollywood into global digital circulation. Radio and television themselves shifted from analog to digital broadcasting, adopting online streaming, podcasts, and mobile apps that allow diaspora and local audiences to access content anywhere. Advertising migrated rapidly to digital platforms, with influencers, meme culture, and viral content becoming integral to political campaigns and commercial branding. The rise of fintech, digital payment systems, online learning, and e-governance further blurred the line between media and everyday life. Nigeria's digital era also produced new forms of political participation. The #Occupy Nigeria protests in 2012 and the #Censors movement in 2020 demonstrated how social media could mobilize national action and global solidarity. Despite challenges such as misinformation, internet shutdown threats, and regulatory tensions, the digital era has created Nigeria's most participatory and decentralized media environment yet. It is a period defined by connectivity, speed, and user-driven content creation, reshaping national communication in ways unimaginable in earlier decades.